guys, just wanted to check in with you guys. I know that you read in your ancient Rome book about Julius Caesar, and I just kind of wanted to go over a few things, make sure that you got everything from the reading. There were some questions that I asked you guys. I can't even remember what all of them were. One was, why did the people love Julius Caesar? And the reason why they loved Julius Caesar, I got all kinds of answers. Some were correct, some were not so correct. The reason why, Julius Caesar was not rich. He was a patrician, but he did not come from a rich family. He had to really work for everything that he received, everything that he gained, everything that he got. He was very driven, very motivated. In our play, you guys read about, you had your play about when he was captured by pirates, and it was because he was going to Greece to learn to take speaking lessons, to be a great orator, which back in the day, that's how you got people to listen to you. There was no TV, there wasn't social media, there was no written word, there was no, anything that the people could do. But if you were a great speaker, people like to listen to you. And if they like to listen to you, you might be able to convince them of things that you believe in. So he was a great orator, but he had to work at it. He went to school. He was taught how to do that. He was a great general. He was one of Rome's most famous generals was Julius Caesar. But the common people, the poor people, they were Romans already, and they really liked Julius Caesar because he was really the common people's man. Most patricians were all about the patricians. Julius Caesar, he knew what it was like to be poor. He knew what it was like to have little means. He was a patrician, so he did have those advantages, but he also could really empathize with some of the poor people. He gave them games. He came up with all kinds of activities for the common people to do, and they could go enjoy it and have fun. And as a poor person in Rome, you didn't have much fun. So he created a way for the common people to have a better way of life. Another thing that he did was, and I don't know that you read it in the reading, but he lowered taxes for the common people. That was huge too, because here they were already poor, and then they were being taxed and taxed and taxed. And so that was another thing that he did, that really the masses of the people, because most people were poor, most people were the common people, but he was really, he garnered their favor. He really did a lot to get their support. I know the first question was, why were there so many poor people in Rome? And most of you got this, and that was good. Most of the people were farmers. And when the patricians and when the Romans would go out and they would conquer lands, they would enslave these people, and they would take the slaves, because the patricians were the ones who paid for the military, which it's kind of an odd concept for us today, because our government, with our taxes, our federal government, that's one of the things that they provide for us as citizens of the United States, is we have a military, we have an army, and they are paid out of the federal funds, which comes from our taxes. Well, that's not the way it was done in ancient times. People had their own armies. So as a general, you had armies, and you supplied them. You fed them and clothed them and paid them and supported them. And so as these people would go out into the lands and conquer, they would bring home these conquered people as slaves for them. And then they would have lands, they would have these slaves work on the land. And then when people would bring their food into the forum, into the market to sell their food, well, the people who had slaves, they didn't pay the slaves to work. So when they came to sell their potatoes or whatever it was, they didn't have to charge as much, because they didn't have to pay people to work on their farms. And the poorer people who were there in Rome, who had land, they did not have slaves. They had to pay workers to work on their farms, so they had to pay the workers. Well, when they came to bring their food into the market to sell, they had to charge a little bit more, because they had to pay the people on their farms. Well, as you can see, if you were going to the store to buy something and you could buy something for half as much, you wouldn't buy the produce from the people who had to charge more. So therefore they weren't selling their food. They couldn't support their farms. So they had to leave their farms, sell them or whatever, and they moved to the city. Well, before you know it, there were all these people living in Rome. And how are they going to support themselves? They were all poor. So that's how all the poor people moved to Rome, is that they could not compete with the wealthy landowners who had slave labor. They couldn't compete with them. Yeah, on the prices and things. And then the third question, what was the third question? So if I sent those back to you for correction, if I did not approve it, you need to go back and correct those and resend them in to me. And some of you have some really old ones that you need to get in. And I also have people who have not taken the Detectives in Togas test. And I have some people who have not taken Chapter 6 test. Or Chapter 5 test, was it? So you need to get that done. I'm taking grades. And if you haven't done a big fat 0, it's not going to go well there. So we can talk about that at class meeting too. All right, let's talk about Julius Caesar, the man. One of the things that I wanted you guys to really learn about Julius Caesar too was he was a great general, and he did have a great strategy to himself. I know the third question was, why did Pompey and Caesar were friends? And then after a time, they weren't friends anymore. Well, it's because he did so many things for the common people. He was not like any other senator that the people knew, because the senators usually looked after the senators, right? They looked after the patricians. But he really was looking after the common man. Well, Pompey got jealous. So most of you got that, okay? Let's see. Was there anything else I wanted to... Oh, I know. Crossing the Rubicon. I don't know if you have heard of that or not before, but crossing the Rubicon is like a real famous saying. What happened? Julius Caesar took his army, which he had all his soldiers, and he went to fight in Gaul. And remember, Gaul was right on to the north of Italy. And so he was fighting there with great success. And that left all the senators there in Rome to talk about Julius Caesar and how all the people loved him and all that. Well, they were getting very jealous of Julius Caesar. And so they decided the best thing to do would be just to do away with him. So what they did, they told Julius Caesar, you have to come home to Rome, but don't bring your army with you. Because if the Rubicon River ran, like here's Italy, the Rubicon River ran here. So here's Italy, here's the river, here's Gaul. So when he's in Gaul, he has to cross that Rubicon River, which runs like this. They said, don't cross the Rubicon with your army. Because if you cross the Rubicon with your army, you're at war with Rome. You're going against a direct order. Well, why didn't they want him to bring his army? Well, because they knew that Julius Caesar was very powerful, and if he had his army there to support him, they knew that there was a possibility that he would win. So they said, you leave your army in Gaul. Well, if he came home, if he went to Rome without his army, what did that mean for Julius Caesar? Well, they'd probably kill him. Okay, so Julius Caesar knew that. What was he going to do? Go to Rome without his army, like he was ordered to do, and probably be killed? Or go to Rome with his army and then be at war with his country? So he had quite a dilemma. But they said, don't cross the Rubicon. So the Rubicon was like the point of no return. So, and it wasn't like the Rubicon was like we think of the Mississippi River or something. It was practically a stream of water. It wasn't a big deal to cross the river. But so Julius Caesar decided to cross the Rubicon. And it's become known as a saying when you say, oh, if you do that, you're crossing the Rubicon. What that means is once you make a decision, you can't take it back. You can't take it back. It's just, you've made that decision and you have to live with it. And so you'll hear that term, that phrase, oh, it's like crossing the Rubicon. It means once you decide, you've decided, okay? Crossing the Rubicon. Well, as we know from your reading, Julius Caesar did cross the Rubicon. It did cause a civil war, which remember we've studied that word civil. It's Latin for where you go to war with a member of your own country. So when Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon into Italy, he was Roman and he was fighting the Romans that were in Rome, and they had a civil war that they fought. So and Julius Caesar did win. And Pompey escaped to Egypt. Remember, it's Pompey. Pompeii is the city in Rome. Pompey was the friend of Caesar that then they started to not get along so well. So Pompey escaped to Egypt. And it said at the end, this proved to be a terrible mistake. So, whoa, why? Well, you're going to read that today and figure out what happened. So, anyway, that's all I wanted to do. Just make sure you understood your reading. See ya.